Well, good morning. There are many important topics being debated in Lansing, from school safety to workforce development to a major election coming up. This morning we'll talk with Michigan's governor about those issues and more. It starts right now.
From TV6, this is The Ryan Report. Here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, after a very successful business career, Rick Snyder became Michigan's 48th governor in 2011. Campaigning as one tough nerd, he pledged a common-sense approach to governing that focused on working together to find solutions for the state's problems. He was reelected in 2014 and now is in the final year of his second term. I'm pleased he could join us this morning. Governor, welcome back to the Ryan Report.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Don.
Nice to have you with us. So you're here for many reasons, I know, but the main reason is to address the commencement at Northern Michigan University.
It is.
What's the message you want to share with the students there?
Well, the message I want to send is I don't plan on talking about all the great results in Michigan, the comeback. I want to spend some time sharing some life lessons with these graduates because it's exciting. What an exciting time in their life, and if I can share any thoughts that were helpful to me, I want to encourage them, and I want to encourage them to stay right here in Michigan.
Give us an example of a life lesson you'll be sharing.
Yeah, life lesson. One of the things I'm a huge advocate of is mentorship. Finding great mentors in your life. I'm sure you had some.
Right. Yeah.
And I can go back and look at my success and say, in many cases, it's attributable to people that sort of took me underneath their wing, that said they would help make me a better person than they did. It started with my parents. And I try to pass that on to people, and I encourage people to look for great mentors as part of their kind of career development process.
Will you be encouraging them to think about the changes that are going to occur in their lifetime? Because I know, I've probably got a couple decades on you, so when I was a kid, we didn't even have television. So as I look at what technology has done in that time, but isn't this a key message to get to young people?
It is, because I tell people I believe the world's only going to become more global and the rate of change is only going to go faster. So one of the messages that ties more into even things we're doing at the state level about talent is most people graduating today are probably going to go through at least 2 major retrainings during their lifetime. That didn't quite often happen in the past, but to stay relevant for your field, it's going to change so much. You're going to have to learn a lot of new stuff, or your field may actually start going away and you want to learn a new field. So we need much more focus on lifelong learning. So one of the things I'm going to encourage people to look at is keep learning your entire lifetime. Find ways to do that even while you're working.
This kind of ties in with something else you're doing, and that's your Marshall Plan for talent development. First of all, tell us what the idea is behind the plan.
Yeah, it's exactly the Marshall Plan for those very reasons. We've done some great things in career tech education and the professional trades, welder, electrician, plumber, but there's more to be done. And when we start looking out to the future, there are certain job categories, robotic technician, computer programmer, that our current system couldn't fill today if we just keep doing the same thing. So the idea with the Marshall Plan is how do we encourage business to come together with K-12 and higher ed and create a much more seamless system focused in on how do you help people get competency-based certificates, credentials that they can go out to prove they can do programming, they can do robotics, they can do these exciting new fields. Again, it's much like a professional trade because these great well-paying jobs are going to be there, and if we don't do more, we're going to leave a lot of them unfilled, and there are people that would love to have those jobs.
And this is more than just training people for jobs, isn't it? It's really our economic development tool for the future.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I tell people that the jurisdiction that does the best at helping people get the skills they need in these high demand fields is going to have a competitive economic advantage. Not only will it help the companies already there, it will be the magnet to attract companies. And we're starting to see that already, Don. I've made 2 trips to Silicon Valley already this year. And it might surprise you, I view the Silicon Valley as one of the most exciting places for us to bring companies to Michigan and bring jobs to Michigan from because they don't have enough people anymore and they need to keep growing. So I'm saying, well, bring the next 100, 200 people that you want to hire, come do it in Michigan because we have those people waiting to work for you and they're going to be great workers.
During your visit here, you met with some people and talked about the plan, some educators, some business people. What was the takeaway from that meeting?
Well, the feedback was very good, and the part that I was really very excited is we did have all those sectors together. So too often we've had a silo for K-12, a separate silo for higher ed, and then business. And they'd sort of pass people from one group to the other. We need to blend all that, and so we had them all seating at the tables together. One from each one of those different categories or a couple from each one of those categories, and they were finding ways to work together. A great illustration is, and you have some wonderful programs up here, is FIRST Robotics. This high school robotics competition. where the high school coaches are there, they're bringing in business sponsors, they're working together. These kids are doing incredible things, and it's not just technical skills they're learning presentation skills and such. And we're leading the world in this field in FIRST Robotics, and it's a great way to get people excited about great careers.
We may talk more about budgeting, but one of the issues is financing for higher education.
Yeah.
And that's something that's going through the budget process now. I think the Senate came up with a little different plan than you did. Where do you think we're heading this year with financing for higher education?
Yeah, I think we'll have a good budget for higher ed. Again, I think we're in the ballpark. There's always some differences when you do a budget. I've learned this every year, right. And we'll reconcile those. And I'm confident we'll get a good budget that will give us more dollars to invest in higher ed, because you should be proud. I'm excited to be speaking at Northern today because they've been a real innovator. They're adding some new programs in fields that are going to be high demand. That's great to see. They're doing wonderful community things, such as the Educational Access Network across the UP. Right. And then they're doing like Invent It, NMU. You may not realize that that's a program I've been touting all over Michigan as a great illustration of how to bring entrepreneurship and innovation to the academic setting.
Okay. So where do you think the budget will wind up? A 2% increase for higher education?
It'll be in that ballpark.
Okay. The Senate's talked about 3%, but they wanted to dedicate some of that to school safety. Not school safety, but university safety.
Yeah, well, the whole issue of school safety is we need to do more for all educational institutions.
And I want to come back to that in just a minute, before we get into that subject, because we have to take a break right
now.
I'll be back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Our guest this morning is Governor Rick Snyder. Governor, let's talk a little bit about school safety. This has become a major issue in our country with the senseless deaths of so many young people. What is Michigan going to do about it, and what is your plan for dealing with this issue?
Yeah, well, this is a critically important issue, and these events have been horrific. The good part is we had already started doing things, so we're not beginning from a fresh start. A couple things we had previously done that have been very helpful is we created OK to Say, which is this anonymous hotline that's been very effective. If you look at the calls coming in from young people, it's really helped prevent a lot of suicides. It's helped with bullying, in addition to this issue of shooters or major school threats. In addition to that, we did a couple rounds of grants to schools about improving their safety features, their access controls. But what I'd say is we need to do more. So I came out with a school safety plan focused in on the 4 areas. What can you do on prevention, intervention, recovery, working through all those different phases of the process. So it's important. One of the things I want to do is highlight OK to Say even more. Not all kids know about it, and we need to make sure we're doing the follow-up. We can do additional grants on helping with access control, better locks at the doors, better access mechanisms. The other part, though, that really needs to work on is having a comprehensive school safety plan that allows us to help find these troubled students. Because if you look at these students, in most every case, that shooter gave a number of series of warning signals that weren't caught. So how do we do a better training of the faculty, the staff, even getting the students involved in the process of looking for students that are becoming isolated? And how do you reach out to them to try to listen to them and get them help if they, whatever help they kind of need to solve that? That's the best answer, is we make it so we never have the shooter situation to begin with.
Well, and I think that is a key point, because and I do want to talk more about the investment in school security, but you can never make a school totally secure.
No.
And you really have to deal with the person who's going to commit that crime.
Yeah, and so that's how do you do that intervention before it becomes that crisis? And again, if you look at many cases, they might have contemplated suicide themselves. In many cases, they were a bully or bullied. Again, who are they talking to or not talking to? And one of the things I did as part of this process, I stopped by a couple schools. I actually had the schools go get a bunch of students without any prior notice to the students to say, hey, the governor just wants to sit down and listen to you, to see what's on their minds and what they thought could be helpful. And they actually had some good ideas. So I'm going to put, actually I asked some students to join a couple committees to help us figure out how to help these kids.
One of the great programs in the Marquette schools is the Police Liaison Officer, which has been there for about 40 years. Marquette was well before its time. But he's not there as an armed guard. He's there to meet and talk with students. Right. Is this part of your plan as well? It
is. And one of the things to do there is this concept of a school resource officer. Is there's no real standards in our state. And so I'm going to ask the group that establishes law enforcement standards to sort of say, what kind of training, what kind of background, what kind of levels could different schools have? And then we should actually be tracking where we have these people around the state, what's working well, and get them talking to one another so they can help one another be even more successful.
As we look at the numbers being thrown about here, the Senate recently proposed $18.5 million for grants this year. I think your plan had $15 or $20 million. Yeah. The House somewhere in the same range. Wisconsin, on the other hand, has a plan for $100 million. And I'm not laying this on your desk.
Yeah.
I think I would ask the same question of anyone in a leadership position. After 9/11, this country invested billions of dollars, changed air travel completely. Are we giving this a high enough priority throughout this country?
Yeah, I think we are. What I would say is one of the reasons we have those kind of range of numbers, and we'll work out a number between us, is I want to make sure we do some work to begin with. It's more than a pilot when you're talking about $15 or $20 million, but let's go out and find out what schools actually need, what would be most effective, rather than just saying there's one answer for every school.
Right.
Let's figure out what the right answer is, because the answer could be different in some capacity, whether you're talking a small rural district or a major urban district.
Right.
And to sort of right size it. And then once we have that model built, then we can expand it and extend it. I would still come back, it's not just about spending money on physical assets like buildings, right. It's really getting back to how do you find these troubled young people?
Well, and
how do you help them?
And obviously a comprehensive plan is certainly part of that. I recently had a chance to hear Michigan State Police Captain John Helpin, and he mentioned in that particular week they had several tips on the okay to say, and one was actually very serious. So.
Yeah, no, they've gotten serious, and so we've actually prevented some of these situations already over the past few years. One of the things, though, going back to that is I know we do a good job getting all the tips, and we pass them on to the institutions. We need to do a better job of making sure the institutions are equipped, the schools are equipped to deal with those tips when they come back to them.
Right.
Because, again, when we actually explored it more, we have some cases where we know we're getting an individual that's going to do something. The other cases are, if it's in the middle of the night we get this tip, is there going to be someone answering the phone line?
Right.
To make sure someone's following up immediately.
So I agree with your point that it's got to all be part of a comprehensive plan.
It is.
A lot of other subjects to talk about, not enough time, but we'll get to some of them. Back with more on the Ryan Report in just 2 minutes. Again, our guest this morning is Michigan Governor Rick Snyder. Let's talk about a few issues close to home. Recently, the Cleveland Cliffs announced that the Empire Mine could possibly reopen. Small delegation recently met with them in their headquarters in Cleveland. I'm sure you're aware of this issue. Are there things the state can do?
Well, I think it's important that we're part of the dialogue, because I think it's great that they're looking to potentially reopen the mine, because it's great paying jobs and it's economic well-being for the area. So I'm happy to be part of the dialogue, and it's going to take some time, I hope, to figure out the best answer. But hopefully they'll ultimately decide to come here.
Is there something the MEDC could do in a case like this?
There could, but I think it's premature to sort of speculate on what those specifics might be, because we're still in that kind of conversation phase and dialogue to see what would be the right combination to hopefully make something happen.
Other big issue is the SULOCs, and of course the President got some attention with talking about the SULOCs. The Army Corps of Engineers has never been a big fan of moving ahead with this project. Do you think there's a possibility now we can get some attention on this matter?
I certainly hope so. I mean, I made a big deal of it over the last few years, and I had some great efforts with the congressional delegation. We came up and made a big presentation, and it was great that it's now resonating with the President. So what we're trying to do now, and I've asked the Lieutenant Governor to take the lead, is keep that dialogue going with Washington to see if we can get something done. This lock was authorized back in the 80s. They just never appropriated the money. And what I would say is I'm not sure that the Corps is really against it. Their methodology, though, to figure out where their investments should go was not the best methodology. And I think we're finally getting a breakthrough for people to realize how critically important to the national economic security it is to get a second lock there. So let's keep this dialogue going. Let's get that second lock.
Another key point is the Enbridge Line 5, which does serve a serious purpose, a very important purpose, but even more attention has been drawn to it in recent weeks and months. Where do you see that we're going to head with this, solving this problem in the long term?
Well, I did an agreement with Enbridge to say let's really get a risk assessment done and then let's study alternatives, because we do need to look at alternatives to see what else could be done because long-term having that pipeline there is not a good answer. But at the same time, simply shutting it down could cause awful impacts on propane supply and prices, particularly in the UP, but gas prices across not just Michigan, but parts of the Midwest. So it's a big economic driver. So we need to strike the right balance. And in the short term, what we've learned is we probably need to do more work on kind of an anchor warning system to make sure that the ships have their anchors up going through the straits. And we're looking at some really important, thoughtful proposals there to make sure that gets done. In the meantime, while we're waiting to see what could be the best answer, or whether it be doing a tunnel or something else underneath the straits.
Budgeting, are we getting close to a budget agreement for this year? I know there are some differences between you and the House and the Senate.
Yeah. There always are
Right.
at this time of year. So, no, I think we're on a good process with the sort of the goal being can we get the budget done in June like we have done the past few years, which we should be really proud of. That's 3 months ahead of schedule. We've had the best practices and the best track record of any state in the nation over the last 7 years because our fiscal year doesn't even start till October. So let's get it done again in June and be proud and do a solid budget so people can do appropriate planning.
We talked about higher education funding. What about K-12 funding? Where are we likely to wind up there?
Yeah, I propose some significant increases in K-12, and I think we'll end up with a good increase, good solid increase this year for our K-12 system. It's not just about spending money, though. I've actually proposed some ideas to say, can we do some specific proposals to help spend more on career tech education? Because if you look at the professional trades, the skilled trades, we still have a lot of demand. And the UP is a great illustration in terms of there's wonderful programs here. One that I visited last year I was excited about. There's a geometry and construction program in 2 or 3 different places. UP is actually our state's leader in it. I've been trying to get other schools downstate to start adopting programs like that where they show it's not just about geometry, it's not just about construction, they can go together.
The school superintendents say the amount being proposed will not allow them to cover their increasing costs. What are your thoughts there?
Well, again, we typically hear from superintendents on a regular basis they would like more resources. We have a good budget. I think we're going to see a good solid increase this year.
The election coming up, you've endorsed Lieutenant Governor Kelly. Why do you feel he should be our next governor?
He's the next generation leadership we need. I actually looked at that back when I asked him to join me on the ticket back in 2010. Because if you look at the best things in life don't happen in 4 or 8 year blocks. They take long-term development, and he's earned it over the last few years. He's been a partner. He helped do the lead in getting rid of the Michigan business tax. He's done regulatory reform. So he's helped build this economic success, but he's also done wonderful things on the people front. He's been a leader in autism, people with disabilities, so many different fields that he's helping lead. So it would be a great continuation of the wonderful things we have going because we've made our comeback, but we have more work to be done and we can't be complacent.
We started off talking about your speaking at Northern. There were some students who objected to you being selected, mainly because of what happened in Flint.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who blame you for what happened in Flint or say that will be a part of your legacy?
Yeah, well, we've responded in Flint. The water quality's been very good, better than federal standards and better than many other communities over the last 22 months. We put a lot of resources in terms of helping with education and other challenges that were in Flint during, but also before the water crisis. And what I would say to the degree people want to object or make a point about my involvement and all that, that's democracy. I respect that. I just hope everyone does it in a respectful fashion because we've sort of lost civility as much as we should have. Right. It's become too personal, too vicious in many respects. We should have differences of opinion, but when we have those, let's put them out there in a way that we can show respect for one another and really stay focused on solving problems.
Okay. Thanks very much, Governor, for coming in. Appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
Okay, I know you have a very busy schedule. We'll have some other thoughts for you in just 2 minutes on the Ryan Report. As I was preparing for my conversation with the governor, my mind drifted off to other things, as it's known to do. In this case, it was history, because many of the political people I talk with and the programs and policies they're dealing with will become part of our country's history. That history will be recorded so future generations can look back and hopefully learn from it. One of the things that has surprised me as I've gotten older is how unaware younger generations are about significant things that happened during my lifetime. Many young people today have little knowledge of what were monumental events in our lifetime. The assassination of President Kennedy, the Vietnam War, President Nixon and Watergate, and the list goes on. How we feel about history changes for many people during their lifetime. Most kids just don't get that excited about it. In fact, many are completely turned off by it. Yet, as many of us get older, our views might change. But the real point I want to make today is history is more than just those big events that shape our world. History is not just about things that come in school textbooks. Although they can also be interesting when it involves events that in some ways touch our lives, the fact is we all have our own personal recollections and memories to share, and they become part of our history. We can go on the internet and find out the name of every person who has served as governor of Michigan. But unless he was involved in some leadership position, we can't find out much about your great-grandfather. Unfortunately, that's the part of our history that's lost because it's not recorded or written down. Memories that grandparents share with children and grandchildren are gone when they pass on. I don't have an easy answer for the problem. Not every family comes with a writer or historian, but it would be good if someone in each family would take on that responsibility. It doesn't have to be a professional job. We just have to try to save some facts and memories that future generations can look back on. Having said that, I should tell you that about 25 years ago, I started writing what I think we could call an autobiography. I'm still at it. It's a lot more work than I thought it would be. It seems like a never-ending task. I guess that's a good thing. Life goes on, and the story goes on. I'll be back in a minute. A couple of closing reminders before we go. First, if you missed the show or want to see it again, you can do that at uppermichigansource.com. Today's show will be available starting at about noon tomorrow. But our other reminder is that you don't have to miss our show because it's now available as a live stream at that same internet address. That means you can watch it live and for a couple of hours later on your cell phone, your computer, or any device, no matter where you are. If you get a chance, check it out. I appreciate Governor Snyder taking time out from his busy schedule to join us today. There are still a lot of big decisions to be made in Lansing. And thank you for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you again next Sunday morning.